Muy buenas tardes, bienvenidos amigos de Logic a esta sesión sobre el tema no controversial, sino más bien práctico de conocimiento, cómo está cambiando los procesos legislativos y la atención al público desde la administración pública con inteligencia artificial. Esta sesión la tendremos con nuestro ponente Ari Hershowitz, que habla español, pero para efectos de su conocimiento, es su idioma nativo, la tendremos en inglés. Entonces, a partir de este momento, cambio el idioma. Sin embargo, las preguntas las podrán plantear en español. Yo se las puedo plantear a él en español y en inglés, y él probablemente elegirá el cómo quiere responder. So, from this moment on, welcome everyone. And let's start with this session. How is AI changing the public and legislative sectors? With Ari Hershowitz. Ari, welcome.
Thank you.
First
Muchas
off,
gracias.
thank you. Gracias por estar aquí. Ari, let me just tell our audience why are we speaking with you? Why are you our primer and most honorable guest? Ari Hershowitz es un innovador en tecnología para el sector público con enfoque en modernización de la infraestructura gubernamental y empresarial. Su sede actual es Palo Alto, California. Tiene formación académica en Derecho, JD de la Georgetown University Law Center, y en Computación y Sistemas Neurales, MSB de Caltech. Ha liderado iniciativas de protección ambiental como director del proyecto BioGems en América Latina. Actualmente fundador de Dream Proit y CEO de GoBabel AI, donde se dedicó a modernizar documentos y flujos de trabajo gubernamentales. Ojo con eso. También trabajó como consultor independiente en Essential Legislative Technologies, ayudando a optimizar el proceso de redacción legislativa. Ari, once again, it's an honor to have you here, to meet you, and honestly, to ask you to show us how AI is really making a difference in the public administration. America Latina is way behind in this matter, so we had to go to you, who have been doing it not just now but for years. So let's start with this conversation. Please tell us how AI is changing the public and legislative sectors.
Well, thank you again for having me here, Roberto. And I'll just step back a little bit and describe a little bit more of what I've done, and also some of my observations of the state of technology and AI in Latin America. So as you mentioned, I've been working in technology, in legislation for more than 10 years. I worked with the House of Representatives in the United States and the Library of Congress. And our project was to take legislation and bills that are going through Congress and show how those bills would affect the law today. And that involved a number of different steps. The core task was to identify what is the law today and put that into a database. And it's much harder than you might imagine, because we've been passing laws since the 1700s on paper and collecting them in libraries or in paper collections, putting those laws into first in online form, PDFs, took many years. And even so, it's not digital in the sense that we can take that text and use it in any modern applications. So we needed to take the laws that have been passed and put them into a structured database, and then use natural language processing, which is part of the big umbrella of artificial intelligence, to interpret how a bill that is coming through, how do I say it in Spanish, un acto legislativo, how that would affect the law and change the law, porque los actos legislativos cambian el lenguaje del ley actual. So bills change the language of a current law, and so you need to keep the database up to date. And that was the work that we did. We also worked with the Library of Congress on projects to research, because it's a library, and a lot of what their work is to provide background information for our legislature, for Congress, to research previous bills and previous laws that look like or are similar to bills that are being introduced today. So that's the broad area that I'm most familiar with, which is the text of bills, the text of amendments and legislation. And for that, the very first step is not even artificial intelligence, it's digitizing. It's converting paper information into digital information. And that's where I would just talk about the experiences around the world, including in Latin America, which is that there are a number of countries, I think Mexico is one of them, Chile, Brazil, that actually have made a lot of progress and sometimes leapfrogged ahead of the United States and other countries in digitizing their laws and their legal information.
Ari, let me just make a pause there, because I do want this last piece of information to be clearly grasped by our audience, because I couldn't agree more with you. Lo que Ari nos está diciendo es que el primer paso para trabajar con cualquier tecnología digital a nivel gobierno, con inteligencia artificial, por supuesto, más concretamente, es tener la información digitalizada. Y eso implicó para él los últimos 10 años en Estados Unidos, país de primer mundo, trabajar precisamente en este proceso de digitalización de las leyes para después volverlas material con el que se puede trabajar. Y él comenta que América Latina, particularmente México y otros países, pondremos a México en el foco, lo ha logrado maravillosamente. Yo llamaría a ustedes la atención en esto. Creían que Estados Unidos era avanzado, en algunos casos no lo es tanto, y México, en cambio, desde aproximadamente hace ya 15 años, solamente tenemos versiones oficiales de nuestras leyes publicadas en el Diario Oficial de la Federación electrónico. Nonetheless, we do print six versions of our legislative pieces of our bills for documental purposes and for museums. But the official versions of our laws are born digital, in a digital sort of portal, which makes them official. So I couldn't agree more with you, Ari. That's thank you for the flowers for our Mexican government in that way. But that's about it, the way I see it. So let's continue with this conversation.
Yeah, and I would emphasize that in the United States, the official version is still the paper version, both of our laws and of our regulations. And in some cases, for example, our laws, we only have an official version published on paper every 6 years. And then there are supplements to that. But by the time it gets published, the official version, which is the paper version, is out of date, right? Okay. So there are still challenges, and then the distinction between what an official version is and the online version gets blurred nowadays, because almost nobody is consulting the paper version anymore. So whether it's official or not, the version that people are using is online. And I would just make one more observation before getting into artificial intelligence, which is that also in the United States, we don't have an official publication of all of our current laws from the government online. Those versions come from commercial vendors like LexisNexis or Westlaw. And so when somebody wants to go and be sure of what the law says, they will go to Westlaw, because they are able to keep the legislation up to date more quickly online, right? So the databases that we were using were not the ones that are published officially online for the public, because the government doesn't have enough resources, or is not given enough resources to do that work and publish it to the public.
I'm also going to take that last piece of information for our audience, because Y aquí esto va para nosotros como abogados litigantes, postulantes. Los portales de legislación de los Estados Unidos de América no contienen la versión más actualizada de sus propias leyes. Por lo tanto, no traslademos ese hábito que nosotros tenemos aquí, donde los nuestros sí se mantienen al día y además nos dicen la fecha de la última vigencia, actualización y demás, no lo traslademos a cuando querramos realizar consultas de piezas de legislación en los Estados Unidos. Ojo con eso, y no sé si alguien de aquí probablemente no lo tenía en el panorama. A lo mejor sí. Ari, that last piece of information, nonetheless, it has relatively nothing to do with our session today. That was gold, so that you know, because we don't have that here. We have the straight opposite.
Right. Yeah, no, and that's wonderful. And there are reasons for that because of the nature of how legislation gets changed in Mexico as opposed to the United States, and that in the United States laws are changed what we call cut and bite. A sentence may be taken out and put in, and so it is much more complicated technically to keep that up to date. But I would say, and this is where I'll talk about how AI has affected our work. That basic requirement of having the information available digitally and accurate sources of information is a prerequisite to doing any work with artificial intelligence, because garbage in, garbage out. If you bring in information that's either not up to date or not accurate, the artificial intelligence will work on that and transform it into something that continues to be inaccurate, right?
Totally.
So getting to your core question, how AI is changing the public and legislative sectors, I would look at this from two approaches, right? And this is, I think, the way that many legislatures are working, and frankly, many companies are working with the new capabilities of artificial intelligence. One is looking at it as outcome first. What is it that we wanted to accomplish in the first place? And do these new technologies help us get there, right? So if your goal has been to make information more transparent, or your goal has been to allow the public to have more direct influence and comments on the legislative process, how are these new tools going to make those sort of long-standing requirements easier or more possible to accomplish? And many of the areas that we've wanted to see, or as a public advocate, I would say I've wanted to see in legislatures for decades, have been greater transparency, public participation, allowing more democratic functions, allowing people from around the country who can't physically go to the legislature every day to participate in the processes of the legislature. There are also questions of efficiency, in order to draft a bill or to process a policy idea. There are some reasons you might want it to take some time, so that we think about things before we change them. But there are some areas of inefficiency that just don't serve any purpose, and it's just because we don't have the systems in place. The COVID-19 pandemic created a huge urgency to change a lot of those processes, because the legislators themselves weren't always meeting in Congress physically. And so there was a rush around the world, and the United States was no exception, to further digitize and support remote communications and remote committee meetings in ways that had faced bureaucratic hurdles before. Right. And so that, I say, this is the outcome first. These are things we wanted to do anyway, and now AI is making more of them possible. And we'll get into some of the details of what kinds of technologies are available. But that's one direction.
So, summarizing this first idea, transparency, information access, and accessibility translate into also agility, speed in being able to access this public information, which as of now, it's not enough just to go to the website of any government dependency and check whatever they chose to publish. Those would be the first three keys of change, AI changing how we interact with government information.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's, as I say, that's looking at things from the outcome first, things, areas that we wanted to accomplish before, but may not have had all of the tools. The other approach is technology first. Wow, we've got this new, cool, interesting technology. What is it able to do? And that can create new ideas of things we had never thought were possible before, and now we want to do them because the technology makes it available.
Sure.
I think this is both an exciting area, but it's also dangerous because it's sometimes gets us into a mode where we want to use technology for its own sake. So we always have to check, is this new application something that really provides value and is a priority? And many...
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. And many, I interrupted you.
Many institutions, including legislatures, are being asked to come up with a list of what are you doing with AI, right? And they may be filling that list with items just to be able to say we're not behind other countries, or we're not behind other institutions. We are also using AI. And I think I continue to say it's important that we don't just add things to the list because they're AI, but we add things that really add value. And I'll give a few examples of things that add value that we may not have thought of before. Yeah.
Right. That what you're saying is not just because the House of Commons, the people in the House of Commons or in the Senate are using ChatGPT, whatever version, that doesn't mean that we are implementing AI in our legislative processes. My partner, Richard, has a phrase, a saying, an analogy, and he says, there are those who are putting, the cherry on top of the cake, saying, oh, yeah, we're using AI, and they're just putting the cherry on top of the cake, which is a traditional cake. And there are those who are actually baking a cherry cake, in the mixture, not just on top of it. So that would be the equivalent. Before going forward, there's a question in your audience, Ari, by Julian. He's saying, would having some sort of patches or versions of a legislative work for keeping up with tech and society in general, sort of like as when you're patching up a piece of software, you're using Python version 13 point whatever. Would that be something maybe simple to implement, and would that be helpful, or are we solving that any other way?
See, yeah, that's a terrific question, Julian. And you give me the opportunity to send you to look for a YouTube video that I made of me speaking about 5 years ago to a GitHub audience about version control in legislation. So you must be very familiar with programming models.
Yes.
The problem with, so there are aspects of version control that you can apply to legislation, but it doesn't work directly the way Git does, because as I said, it may work better in a place like Mexico, but in the United States, where the laws are replaced, here's the law, you replace it with the other law, and so you really have a commit model. In the United States, we don't have that. We have changes in the language, and our bills are not written in the form of a new law. It's written in the form of an amendment language. So in Section 4 of Title 3, make the strike the word hello and insert the word goodbye. And that's something that current version control programs, Git or others, don't address. And that is the natural language processing tool that we built for the United States Congress, called the Comparative Print Suite. So it essentially takes a Git model, but uses natural language to create each of the new commits or versions of the law.
I'll translate. En Estados Unidos, la modificación de leyes no se realiza dentro del texto como lo hacemos nosotros. Nosotros abrogamos una ley completa y creamos una nueva. Y cuando las modificamos, cuando derogamos una pieza dentro de una ley o norma, literalmente sustituimos una por otra y ya está. Y tenemos una nueva versión completa del cuerpo. Y noten que esto que ocurre en las leyes a nivel público lo hacemos los abogados a nivel privado, corporativamente hablando, salvo por excepciones como cuando creamos una adenda a un contrato. Al modificar estatutos, modificamos el texto y los abogados más prudentes lo que hacen incluso es publicar la nueva versión de los estatutos ignorando las anteriores. Eso es posible a nivel como de programación, es lo que nos comenta, pero Estados Unidos trabaja distinto. Estados Unidos no sustituye piezas de información en el texto, crea los famosos amendments o modificaciones, que son literalmente más párrafos de texto donde nos dicen, donde dice tal cosa, ahora deberás entender esto, ya sea que sustituya o intente sustituir o simplemente le dé una nueva interpretación a sus leyes y eso dificulta el trabajo. Por eso ha sido importante lo que Ari está haciendo. Thanks so much, Ari. Julian, thanks you. He'll check this YouTube video to see what you were talking about 5 years ago. So now, okay, let's dive into it. What are the key areas in these public sector initiatives or legislative processes where AI technologies can be applied today practically, and how can you compare them to our reality in Latin America and Mexico?
Great. Yeah, and I won't be able to give a comprehensive answer. And there are more than 200 legislatures around the world making their own decisions about what they could do. And the International Parliamentary Union has published some research on what various countries have done. And it's very innovative. And again, I would point to places like Canada, to Brazil, Chile, that I'm familiar with. Norway also has some very interesting applications. I'll just highlight three. One is in the processing and understanding of the text of law, amendment, and regulation. That's what I was talking about before, and I can come back to that. That's the area I'm most familiar with. The other is constituent services. So in the United States, and I think many other legislatures, the legislature has a dual role. One is to pass new laws, but the other is to respond to citizens when they have an issue with a local regulation or with a local office, when they have an immigration problem. So they will write to their congressperson and say, I need some help. And their office will directly help them work through that bureaucratic process. And, this is a question of numbers, that there are tens of thousands of constituents to each representative. So how do you deal with that without having a massive staff? And AI is particularly good at summarizing information, at translating, transitioning information. And so many more of these constituent services can be handled by the legislature. The other is the process of legislation itself. So that's legislative committees and hearings and places that until now, all of the work happened in person and you had to be there to participate. With AI, one of the strongest and most accurate applications of AI technology is transcription and translation, right? So you can take the proceedings of a committee, transcribe it into text automatically, translate it into various different languages, including native languages, and this has been a huge benefit for countries that have native populations that speak a different language. They may also not be literate even in their own language, so then you can take the translated information and apply text to speech. So now you get a new spoken version of a hearing that was in the original language. So allowing people to participate, and the idea of allowing people to participate also goes back 20 or 30 years. In the United States, we have C-SPAN, a video broadcast of the proceedings, but now you can not only broadcast, but you can provide that information in many different forms. And this is another area that I would underscore. When we talk about AI now, the excitement around AI has been driven by a technology called transformers. Large language models are based on transformer technology. There are a lot of other aspects of AI, but that's what has driven the most recent sort of wave of interest in AI. And transformation of information is extremely useful for a legislature. The legislature creates information in one form, and all of these areas that I'm talking about, that work with the text, constituent services, work in the committees, involves a translation or a transformation of existing information into forms that new bodies or new groups of people will be able to access.
Those are actually two pieces of, or two aplicaciones prácticas, practical uses of AI that are easily implemented. And I would say, I don't know why we haven't thought of them before in a universal or in a comprehensive state all around, up and down, east and west, not only in the US, but in countries. You're saying that, first off, of course, the government speaking with the people. Now through AI, you don't have to contract or spend a lot of money in call centers and then, capacitating the people. You just use AI and people can ask of the government whatever they need to know, first off. And second, making public information available, not just through putting it in a website, but translating it to, I haven't thought about that. The US is probably one of, if not the first country in terms of diversity, linguistical diversity, ethnical diversity, not unlike Mexico in many ways. And this has been the instrument to make public information available for everyone through transcription, translation, and then even text-to-speech for those who cannot read. This is, I don't know, whimsically simple. Has this become a universal state of things in the US? I mean, is there a piece of legislation that says this has to be done, or is it just politics and depends on whomever is at the time in office making this possible?
Yeah, I think the United States, again, is somewhat behind in using these transcription services. There are other countries that have moved ahead to use AI, in part because I think the United States already has had people doing transcription in committees and other areas. And so sometimes it's harder to replace a process that you already have than a country that has had no ability to do the transcription before and now can go from 0 to 1. So I would say the reason I underscore transcription, translation, those things, is that these are both, like you say, some of the easier applications of AI, but also some of the safer ones, in that, as you know, when you see a transcription, if you see closed captioning of a movie, if they make mistakes, it's no es tan grave. It's not as big.
I agree, yeah.
And you're not changing actual legislation. You make some mistakes in the understanding of somebody, trying to listen to a proceeding. And that's where I would say, so to your question, I think I'm not the only one who's come up with this as like a target. It's not so much, the United States is not the leader in this, though. I think many other countries are moving ahead with translation and transcription. And again, because there are native languages that may be official languages. The United States doesn't have, even though we have huge diversity, we don't have official, other official languages in many cases. It may vary state by state.
Agreed. Nos comenta Ari que dos de las aplicaciones comunes también son las más simples, las que todos muy probablemente ya utilizamos. Ahora mismo, right now, I'm seeing a bot right here, which is recording and taking notes of this conversation. Theren 333 is Phantom Note Taker. Y lo que Ari nos comenta es, el gobierno de los Estados Unidos comenzó por aquí la comunicación entre el gobierno y los ciudadanos a través de chatbots de inteligencia artificial que sustituirían a los call centers o al burócrata levantando el teléfono y respondiendo a las preguntas de la ciudadanía. Y el segundo tiene que ver con hacer accesible la información pública, desde la transcripción de las discusiones o las piezas de información, leyes, reglamentos, decretos, políticas, su posterior traducción y luego, por supuesto, un paso más allá, el hacerlo accesible a las personas que quizá no saben leer. Sobre todo pensemos no solo en angloparlantes, sino comunidades latinas o, ¿por qué no?, comunidades indígenas, o de otro tipo. Y él comenta que esto tiene que ver sobre todo no porque sea fácil, sino porque es seguro. Un error en la traducción de cara a simplemente dar a conocer una conferencia o las discusiones no causa mayores temas ni problemas. No es lo mismo como implementar, por ejemplo, inteligencia artificial en el área fiscal. Ari, let's open a parenthesis and talk about this. The US used people to do all this, and now the difficulty in implementing AI is that you have to let go all those people that only do this. They just transcript, translate, answer the public's questions, and now you can let them all go and implement AI very easily, very quickly. Has this problem become a topic of discussion in the public administration in the US?
I don't think I think this is like any technological transformation. There's always some concern that this technology is going to take my job, or that it's going to take the jobs of the people who are working in it. We saw this even with the digitization, right? There are still a lot of public servants whose job it is to print things in exactly the right way, so that the lines line up exactly, so that the fonts are perfect. And there's always going to be that tension of the people who have been specialized over years for a particular function, and then shifting over to new technology. And in the case of publication, there are things that you lose. It's not as it just does not have the same official character, no matter how much work you do on the fonts and on the display, but it's much more accessible. So I think that's, like any technological transition, that is going to be part of the discussion. It's not going to happen overnight. And in the United States, again, I don't see the people working on transcription being replaced right away. Their transcriptions are still more accurate. There's still more context. One other area that I would point to where it's clearly not going to happen so quickly is in summarization. So AI is also pretty good at summarizing in general. You take a news article, you put it in ChatGPT, you say, summarize this, and you get a pretty good summary. Mm-hmm. The problem with law and legislation, if you've tried to do this in your legal practice, is that you take legal text, ask for a summary, and the LLM or ChatGPT only knows what you've provided to it. It does not have the legislative context. So when you do a summary, you need to know, for example, if I put in a bill that says this act is going to be illegal from now on, a person may know that that act is already illegal, so this bill is superfluous. It doesn't do anything. The AI would take the text on face value and say, oh, this bill would make this act illegal, right? And so there are areas, even where AI is good in summarization, where it's going to miss information because it doesn't have the historical context. I don't know if that answer, and that's an area to be very careful of because a lot of people don't realize that and they look at the summary. If you're not an expert, you look at a summary or you look at the output and you say, this looks good to me. But when you need to use it, as a lawyer or as an expert in the field, you start to get this automated output and it doesn't serve your purposes. So I guess what I'm saying there is that we can replace people in areas where where there's really a one-to-one correspondence. The AI is really doing what the person used to do, but there are a lot of areas where the person is adding value, and the AI is not able to do that, at least not yet.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the practical uses where it's already being used or could be used, but you warned us this wouldn't be a comprehensive expression of it mainly because of time and maybe span of attention also. But there are many uses. But let's talk about the main benefits of applying AI in the public sector and in the legislation sector. If we could hear from you, in your opinion, which would be the top 3 benefits? What would they be?
Yeah, so they're all basically variations on the same one, which I would say is transparency.
Transparency.
Because AI is good at moving information from one place to the other, it makes it easier to disseminate information and make it possible for people to understand what the legislature is doing. There are some of the others that we've talked about. Efficiency is definitely one. And then also sort of providing new opportunities or new capabilities. And this is one where any one of us has seen the new AI tools are really good at brainstorming. Give me 12 ideas for vegetarian sandwiches to make this afternoon, right? So similarly, I think AI can be used for brainstorming ideas for legislation and thinking out of the box in a sense. And that's one of the uses that I think are not as obvious, but it's actually a strength of the new AI tools.
Agreed. As a complement to our own mind and mindset and mind processes, ultimately as a tool. So when we talk about strengths, we also have to talk about challenges, not weaknesses, but challenges in the government sector, concretely in policy making and government agencies. Which would be these challenges other than maybe learning about the technology? If we can skip that one, because that's with every piece of technology, which would be the other main challenges that you can outline for us? Sorry, we lost him. Perdimos, pero ya lo dejamos entrar de nuevo.
I'm so sorry about that. I think my internet froze.
No problem, Ari. We lost you for about maybe 30 seconds. So may I repeat this next question for us? which is the challenges, the main challenges in those two areas, policymaking and government agencies, and whatever the branch of the government we are, except for the judicial, which faces its own challenges. Which would be these challenges, the main challenges that you can foresee in the use and implementation of AI? I was saying other than adopting the technology or understanding it, which is, of course, the first challenge, learning to use it.
Right. So I would say that the greatest challenge is related to the greatest strength of AI, which is that the current tools of AI are very good at appearing to be human. They are very good at doing things that we thought or that only people could do. Why I call that a challenge is that often this appearance is deceptive. It appears to be correct for somebody who doesn't know the area, but for experts who know what the output should look like, they can see all the flaws. So in the earlier AI, where it wasn't doing as good a job at appearing human, it was much easier to pick out, oh, this is correct, this is not correct. But now you get a result, it looks right, and we all are sort of lulled into the idea, oh, let's let this go through. And so a lot of inaccuracies could go through, especially if we use AI to do things that are substantive and have impact on people. So people want to use AI for drafting, writing legislation. Well, the words may look good, but the impacts on people are real. And if there's any inaccuracy there, that really could cause damage.
Great. So this is worth translating also. El mayor reto que tenemos en este momento, en el caso de que las agencias gubernamentales, el gobierno comience a utilizar inteligencia artificial en cualquier nivel, en cualquier punto, es precisamente que la gente confíe en que el resultado es correcto. Lo que hoy llamamos alucinaciones ni siquiera tendríamos que llegar hasta allá, es decir, presentan las inteligencias artificiales generativas la información de un modo tal que en apariencia nuestro cerebro va a asumir que es correcto lo que nos está presentando y solo para el ojo no educado, solo para el ojo educado ese riesgo no es real o no es patente, pero para el resto del aparato burocrático sí. Entonces se lo considera el mayor riesgo precisamente, el modo como se presenta la información le parece correcto a la persona, al burócrata que está utilizando la inteligencia artificial. Y eso es definitivamente muy interesante. No se centra en sí. You're not focusing, Ari, on whether an LLM will show us accurate information or not, which is, of course, a technical challenge, but whether people getting the output will be able to tell the difference between good and not so good or accurate information. And that is a human problem, right? Not a technical problem, not even an LLM's problem.
Right. And the reason I say I do consider it a technical problem is that the LLMs have gotten so good that it enters in that area where people can be fooled, right? So it's actually from the power of these current technologies that we have this challenge.
Yeah, actually, Julian put it in words I actually like. Visually nice shows socially harmful or dangerous, right? It's so good, or it looks so good that it can fool us. So that's a challenge. So what would be the recommendations in overcoming these challenges? The first easy answer might seem as though let's make AIs truly accurate, truly so powerful, so damn powerful that they do not make mistakes. But is that really possible? Would that be a factual recommendation? Do we have to look elsewhere?
Yeah, so I think that we don't have to look at that question if we're careful in the first place about how we're using AI. And that's where, I worked on a panel of international recommendations for legislatures in using AI, and these guidelines have been published again by the Interparliamentary Union, and so and those kinds of guidelines are going to be evolving. And I break it down into two. There's a very long list of guidelines because it goes into the specifics of each use case, but I would break it down into two questions. One is, when you're thinking of an AI application, how important is accuracy in the application? And if accuracy is not so important, well, great, go ahead and use the AI, and you don't have to be as careful. And the second, I go back to the question of how well can a person distinguish between inaccurate and accurate information? So if it's an important application and you're using AI, make sure that the people who are screening it or using it or applying it can tell the difference, and so that there's a final check to say yes or no. I think your point of working to the point where AI is as accurate as a person, I mean, that may be an ideal, but that's sort of like the Zeno's paradox. We're always going to be working a little bit towards that goal, but we'll never get there completely.
Agreed. Nos comenta Ari que realmente 3 guías, esto ya es gobernanza, 3 guías para el uso de la inteligencia artificial en la administración pública, más allá de si debería existir o no una ley que lo permita o lo prohíba, o su incorporación en los procesos, es, número 1, el funcionario tiene que analizar si efectivamente el trabajo que está haciendo o que pretende auxiliarse de inteligencia artificial reviste una importancia meridiana, o simplemente es algo en lo que no importa el resultado que le dé la inteligencia artificial. En otras palabras, ¿qué tan importante o qué tanto quiero confiar en la inteligencia artificial para resolver ese primer problema? Número 2, la capacidad misma de la persona. Si la persona que lo está utilizando tiene o no la capacidad de distinguir entre un resultado bueno y uno malo. Eso, cara a México, nos lleva a preguntarnos si le daríamos herramientas de inteligencia artificial, por ejemplo, a los burócratas que están en ventanillas, que tienen una formación mínima y que solo saben leer lo que dice la computadora, pero quizá en otros altos mandos sí. Y tercero, no pensemos que llegaremos nunca, por la paradoja de Xenón, a una inteligencia artificial que nunca va a cometer errores. Siempre tendremos esta posibilidad de confiar demasiado y no revisar. Entonces, those are actually governance guidelines that should be implemented both in the public sector and in the private sector. So, Ari, we're arriving at the final way of this dissertation. Let's talk about the legal/ethical considerations. One of them is, of course, the one that you've already stated. Let's not trust face of what the AIs tell us or the results that we get. Are there any other legal or ethical considerations that we should be addressing?
So again, this is a very rich area where people are devoting their entire careers to it. There are guidelines and books. Trying to simplify, I would focus on one area, which is responsibility. Tools and technology can't take responsibility for decisions. So when you're applying AI in areas that require responsibility, and legislation is and legislatures are a very important area where this occurs, it's key to make sure somebody is still responsible for the output. So that's again where, if you're having AI draft your policies for you, there's a temptation to say, "Oh, I didn't write that; the AI wrote that." It happens there's a big debates in law firms. Law firm uses AI, and more law firms are using it, and then they go to court, and the question is, well, who's responsible for if the AI makes a mistake? And I think obviously the answer is the lawyer or the person who used the AI, and that's so everything to me comes back to ensuring that when any technology is used, including AI, there is a responsible party for the outcomes that are created.
Okay, so complete autonomy in the usage of AI in the public sector might not ever be possible, not complete autonomy, right? That would
Well,
be
I would say it's never advisable. We may be able to set up those systems, but then it undermines the democratic process. We voted for representatives and not for machines to make decisions on policy.
okay. So that will be another paradox that we will have to solve if and whenever people choose to be, I don't know, answered or get their issues solved by a robot when asked directly, right? But that's technically not right now, or the conversation isn't there yet. So lo que nos dice Ari es la responsabilidad. En última instancia, ¿quién firma? ¿Quién va a ser el responsable por el uso o la aplicación del resultado que dé la inteligencia artificial? Y eso en el sector público es básico, no nada más porque es el gobierno, sino porque, y él lo ve desde la perspectiva democrática, una conversación muy interesante que traduce filosofía política a la práctica. La gente votó por alguien para que tome las decisiones, no para que las delegue en una inteligencia artificial. Y yo le comentaba, eso suena muy bien desde la perspectiva de la filosofía política, pero ¿qué va a suceder cuando el pueblo vote porque sean los robots y no sus representantes los que tomen las decisiones? Ari, this has been a very enriching conversation. It's been a pleasure hearing you, and to have you here, it's an honor. Thank you so much for accepting this invitation and for being here in the Legal AI Week by Logic.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks to the audience who is part of this.
They're also thanking you. Really, it's been a pleasure. I hope we see you in the future so that you can update us on these issues, both in the US and in Latin America, which I know you follow very thoroughly.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.